to explore Kiddush. And I wanted to look at the actual Kiddush itself, because I think it illuminates a great deal of how we move into Shabbat in a different way, sort of the embodiment, sort of the physical action of participating in Shabbat outside of prayer, but at the table. And then look at a famous Zohar teaching. So I don't have a Hasidic text tonight, but I have a text from the Zohar for us to look at our mystical tradition, which I think will give you a very tangible way that you can perhaps shift the way you experience Kiddush starting this week. And so this is what we're going to do. If you have the text, I invite you to look along. Otherwise, I'm going to share them on my screen. And I'm going to try to do this as best as I can where I can see everyone. I'm going to go back and forth in the hopes that some of you have them. If you don't, I think it'll be just fine. But we know, and we studied this last time, that in Exodus 20, it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kodsho. It says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So I'm going to ask again, what does it mean to remember Shabbat?
I think he remembers the creation, you know, the whole finishing of the creation, and now the work is done. And so you're remembering that moment in time.
Great. Other ideas? What does it mean to remember Shabbat? Deborah.
To keep it different, to make it distinct from the rest of the week.
Great. Stuart.
Well, I was going to say what Deborah said in just a slightly different way, just to remember to stop from your weekday activities and refocus yourself.
Great. So actually, before we go into the actual Kiddush itself, does anybody have a formative memory of Kiddush, of saying a blessing over wine, specifically on Shabbat? Yeah, Phyllis.
Every Friday night, my family would gather together and light Shabbat candles and say the blessings over the wine and the challah. I mean, every Friday night from when I was born, I think, till the day I left for college. I mean, we were expected to always be there. And, you know, it's probably one of the first songs that my brothers and I learned to sing, were all the blessings and the full Kiddush, not just the short one, but the Yom HaShishi all the way through. And my family is known for its terrible singing voices. So you can only imagine the cacophony that a family of 5 would make on Shabbat, but it never seemed to bother us. It was just like, this was the family gathering together, and it was a coming together. And I guess the difficulty now, and I'll probably get a little emotional tonight, is that my dad died probably 22 years ago, and I can't hear Kiddush without crying. So, because I keep thinking about him. So if I turn off the video, that's just why. So it was a very formative memory for me. And I did it with my family as well. Not the whole thing, but you know, we left out the Yom HaShishi part and then we just did all the rest.
Thank you, Phyllis. Do others have, you can just raise your hand, do you have similar family memories around a Shabbat table? A few of you. So I'm gonna ask a question and then we'll get some more. Phyllis, were you standing or sitting?
Oh no, we were all standing.
Okay, great. I'm gonna ask that and go around. We'll explore that in a little bit too. Okay, Marty.
No, I just remember my father singing the Kiddush over the wine, and I actually heard it so many times I never had to read it. I could sing it without ever having seen the words, just from his voice. And he was at the Glee Club in Columbia, and the most beautiful voice. And like he passed away 12 years ago or 13. I remember the first time going to services after that and hearing everybody singing. I just started crying right there in front of everybody. I was like, and my wife looked at me, what? And so it's one of those things where that prayer brings him back so fast. And my kids used to joke when I would sing it, sing the short version, Dad, because I can't sing to save my life, but I would sing the long versions just because it brought him back every single time. So it is a pleasure to do it. And every time I sing, I think of him. And I don't do it every week, but enough. And every time I come to services and we sing it, I think of him. So he's very associated with that prayer.
You're going to see on Friday nights, well, at least this Friday night, you're going to see on your email on Friday, you're going to receive something that appears to be a bingo card. But what it is, in fact, is a why I'm celebrating Shabbat, why I'm observing Shabbat, why I'm here card, essentially. One of the squares, in some sense, is about memory and is about remembering. So thank you both for sharing that. Danny.
I don't really remember anyone in my family being particularly adept at it, but I do remember from temple growing up, hearing it often. But I think the part that's most formative for me is the moment where I took on the practice of doing it myself, from Yom HaShishi all the way through. And it was very empowering. I think this ability to this first bit of liturgy that I could do myself and lead and feel like I'm not just a passive participant in someone else's Judaism, but I'm taking control of my own. That felt
Great.
Felt interesting.
Thank you, Danny. Deborah, and then Carol, and then we'll hop into our text.
Mine is 8 summers of summer camp at Tel Nor and doing the Kiddush Friday nights in the dining hall. I can still smell the chicken soup from the kitchen and just all of us being together reciting it. And like Martin, I learned it by heart just by repeating it before I could even read it.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Deborah. Carol? See?
Oh,
there you go.
sorry.
I got you. Okay,
thanks.
You're good.
I remember waiting for my dad to get home from work every Friday night. And he would take his jacket off, but he'd leave his shirt and his tie on. And then we would sit down for Friday night dinner. And he would always stand up for Kiddush and Motzi. And Kiddush, he only did the short version of Kiddush to begin with. But the Motzi, he'd always tear the challah and then pour salt on it before eating it. But at some point when he became about 50, he switched to the full Kiddush. And I remember again, standing up and doing that forever, every Friday night. And I remember my dad died 3 years ago. And I remember the Friday night when he forgot the Kiddush, he was no longer able to do it. And I stood up and took over, which was tough. And particularly because tonight's his Yortzeit. So it's bringing back a lot of memories.
Well, let's add his memory to our learning this evening. So thank you for sharing. So Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kadosh. So we should remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. I hadn't even considered Zachor as sort of a double meaning in that sense of memory and remembering Shabbat, but memory in that sense as well, of remembering the ones who sat at our tables. So that's a really extraordinary thing. I need to hold. I too am thinking about my family as well in that sense. But I wanted tonight to look at the 3 parts of the Kiddush. And I don't want to spend our whole evening on it, but I think that they're important because we have to understand why it is that we're using this prayer at this sense. Let's imagine we've lit the candles. Let's imagine we've sat and participated in services in some capacity. You've arrived back at home. In some cases, this is done in the synagogue. And the reason it's done in the synagogue in many cases today is because there may have been an assumption that it wasn't happening at home. And so a lot of the home rituals that you see happening in synagogues derive from that in order to help people fulfill their obligation. But in the sense that this is a home ritual. So the question is why do we have these things? So let's look at the first part of Kiddush. And a few of you said the Yom HaShishi. So the first part of a traditional Kiddush comes from reciting the end of the first chapter of Genesis, which says, Vayer vayvoker Yom HaShishi vayechulu hashamayim ba'aretz v'kol tzva'am. There was evening and there was morning the 6th day. Okay. The heavens and the earth and all their components were completed. God completed by the seventh day the work that God had done, and God rested on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. For on it, God rested from all the work that God had created to do. So this is a very familiar text to many of us, right? This is the end of the creation story. Speaking of Shabbat, what is God doing? God is separating from the work of creation and doing something on Shabbat. But why would we start this table ritual with this? Why might that be important? Nancy.
Well, I don't know, maybe this is too simplistic, but it seems like starting off with the separation is kind of obvious. That's the best way to start. It's the beginning of separating ourselves from the rest of the week. So I don't know if there's a deeper meaning than that, but.
Anyone else? Thank you. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Anyone
Maybe it has
else?
something to do with work. I mean, the fact that there's no work, work is completed, so now we don't work.
Okay. So we're separating from work, except for Susan. Susan, go ahead.
Thank you, Philip. You don't separate from work either. I think it sets the scene. I think it's God's done all of this. It's time to rest. You've done all of this. It's time for you to rest.
So it's sort of the prologue in some sense, right? It's setting up the action that's going to happen, or the lack of, in some sense. Yes, great. Thank you. Anyone else? Why might this be important?
Well, it's the creation of Shabbat. This is where we find, I think, the first mention of the seventh day. God rested from all the work. It's the creation of Shabbat. So that's, as Susan said, it's the.
Oh, you muted yourself.
I just said it's the reason for what we're doing right now.
Got it. Great. So it's the reason. Great. Linda, did you want to add something?
I just wondered if it was to start by reminding us of the greatness of God, that reflecting on the fact that he created the world and it was done in 6 days according to the Bible, and that we should first be sort of mindful of the awesome power of God.
Great. All of that is true. I think everything that everybody's saying is all true. Danny and then Stuart.
I wonder if there's something about what separates Shabbat from any other moment where we say Kiddush. So we say a Borei Pri Hagafen on other times during the year, and at least to my knowledge,
or on other glasses of wine.
Or on other glasses of wine, and even for our festivals, there isn't a preamble that I know of. There's a follow-on prayer, but this is the only one that says, "Hey, wait a second. There's a reason we're doing it. This is a special one. It's for Shabbat." And there's an interesting intention setting there and a distinction with other blessings on wine.
So great. So building on what Danny just said, we know that we use wine to demarcate space and time, right? We do that all over the place, all over the calendar. In fact, the blessing over wine in itself is pretty. It's as ubiquitous as Borei Pri Ha'etz, a blessing over fruits of the tree, or Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, blessing bread. You can say it all the time. If you have a glass of wine this evening, you could say, should say Borei Pri Hagafen, right? That is a blessing over what you're going to partake in. But right, like Danny said, it gives it a little bit more of a context for why we're here, and building on everything everyone else has said. Stuart.
Just to unfortunately digress just a second, the verb in that second sentence, it was curious to me because it's v'yachulu, which gives to me a different sense than an ending or completion. It was enabled, which to me the process is ongoing. And therefore God's work is as God is infinite, God's work continues despite the demarcation. And the heavens and the earth are not completed. They are enabled to function at that point, but it is still part of an ongoing process.
Great. So what Stuart is, thank you, Stuart. What he is speaking of is the word vayechulu, which is, there's a lot of different grammatical formations of this word that you could unpack. The interpretation that Stuart is taking is the word yechol, could mean able. And so in addition to perhaps an infinite or sort of a future tense or a past tense, whatever it is, but there's definitely the possible reading of that way. And I really like that is sort of an ongoing thing. Thank you, Stuart. Howard, please.
I'm wondering how wine and bread, for that matter, got elevated to these positions.
So we know that even in the temple, that there was a use of wine in the temple. We know that we see this in the Talmud, and we don't necessarily have a blessing for wine in the Bible, but we don't have blessings really for anything in the Bible. But it was used in the temple as part of the temple ritual. So even then, in that sense, it was elevated because it had a sacred use.
But my question remains, how did it get elevated to be used in the temple? Why wine versus something else?
Also oil. I don't know a specific answer to that question. That is a good one. Carol, do you have an idea?
So this may be more midrash than biblical, but after the flood, when Noah and his family got out of the ship or the ark, the first thing they planted were the vineyards. And theoretically, they're the first family that actually planted grape vineyards. So maybe those grapes or that wine sort of has the meaning of the creation of a new world or creation of a new beginning. So that's my thought.
That very well could be. Howard?
Yeah, well, as I was thinking of the question, I thought of this as a possible answer, that both wine and bread require transformation by man, creativity. And I think there's some reflection of that in the prayer.
Sure, absolutely. You also see that more explicitly in Hamotzi, right? They were blessing Hamotzi, the one that brings forth bread from the earth. But we know that the way that it became, you don't eat the wheat, right? You have to work it for it to become bread on your table. Yeah, I think that is very, very a very, very important understanding to these blessings. So yes, thank you. Shelley.
A very simple explanation for the use of wine in the temple, Howard, might simply be that wine has a certain effect on you, particularly if you drink enough of it, and it transports you to a state where you're more open to, shall we say, things that are not of the day or the moment or the ordinary, and you're open to the mystery of your religious observance.
So I'm going to digress based on what Shelley just said to show you a few different rabbinic texts, and then we're going to go back to the Kiddush. So look, if you scroll down onto the second page, you'll see here various texts on wine from the Talmud. Okay, it says, this comes from Bava Batra. Wine is the greatest of all medicines. Where wine is lacking, their drugs are necessary. Rav Huna said, wine helps to open the heart to reasoning. Here's another one. Until the age of 40, liberal eating is beneficial, but after 40, it is better to drink more and eat less. Wine gives appetite, cheers the body, and satisfies the stomach. The wine which is kept for the righteous in the world to come has been preserved in the grape ever since the 6 days of creation, right? So that comes from the Talmud in Brachot. Actually, it's not Brachot. It's, I'll get back to you. What did I abbreviate here? No, it is Brachot. Okay, and then in Eruvin it says, Rav Chia said, whoever remains clear-minded when drinking possesses the qualities of 70 sages. The word yain, wine, adds up numerologically to 70, which is also the same as sod, secret. So then they say, as soon as wine enters, the secrets escape. So you can see here, there's a lot of thinking about wine. As Shelley just articulated, the rabbis also knew that if you consumed too much of it, it altered one's state. But I think that the wine that they were having was a very different product than the wine that is on our tables. And so we also know that wine, like beer, was safer to drink than water. Okay, I want to go back to Kiddush. So there's the blessing over, so we say the 6 days of creation, and then we go back and there's a blessing over wine. The Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Okay, then we have a specific part of the blessing that sanctifies the day. And I broke it up here into 5 parts, because I think there are 5 different pieces. Every blessing has a beginning, Baruch atah, and every blessing has an ending, Baruch atah, and then there's a chunk in the middle. So Danny, would you take us through these, and we'll kind of stop in between each one?
Happy to. Blessed are you, infinite one, source of the universe, whose mitzvot allow us to become holy through our actions.
Okay, so what is this saying? Anyone?
Doing mitzvot brings us to a higher level, spirituality, emotionally, interpersonally. And so we're thanking God for allowing us to do that.
So we're about to participate in a sacred mitzvah. We're thanking God for the ability to participate in that. Danny, go on.
Who gave us the sacred Shabbat with love, who made the sanctity of Shabbat our heritage and a reminder of the work of creation.
So we're setting apart this day. We are sanctifying this day. What is this part of this blessing saying?
We've received a gift.
We've received a gift. Talk to me about our heritage and with love. What does that mean?
We're part of a special tribe, and this is something special for us to do.
Okay.
And whether Jewish people, I don't know if other religions have it, also have a Shabbat in the sense, I mean, I know the Christians have Sunday, but I don't know if it's the same kind of feeling. So maybe it's because we have Shabbat and others don't.
I don't remember the details, but I'm recalling from our last session something about this gift of Shabbat. We used it in the context of light, but there was something about this gift and filling our heart or something. I can't remember what it is, but it feels like it mirrors that discussion we had last time.
Yeah, that Shabbat is a gift, and we have to open ourselves up to receiving it. We were talking about,
and it's an identity with those who have gone before us.
Right. Achad ha'am once famously said, more than the people of Israel have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the people of Israel. But I love this idea that we're thanking God in this blessing of setting apart this day. We've set apart this day. It's going to be important. It's the culmination of the work of creation. Then we say a blessing over this sacred wine. And then we have to say, well, why are we saying this sacred wine blessing? It's because we're celebrating Shabbat. And this is the prayer that separates Shabbat as something holy. Kiddush in and of itself means holy or sacred, right? So we need to just say it out loud, what may be obvious to all of us participating in this ritual in the moment, but that this is a sacred time. Shabbat is sacred. It's a gift of love. It connects us to our people, and it's a reminder of creation. Okay, so now we can't have any sacred Jewish ritual without the following.
As first among our sacred days, it recalls liberation from Egypt.
Keep going for the last three.
We seek to be holy to you, to embrace this sacred potential among all people. For out of love, you have passed down to us your holy Shabbat. Blessed are you, Infinite One, who sanctifies Shabbat.
Okay, so what's unique to me here is that we recall Egypt. Why is that? Why, if we're marking Shabbat, do we have to mark that recalls our liberation, our exodus from Egypt? Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim.
So we can
Yeah.
celebrate.
I would think that it is, again, a thread from the creation of the world through the liberation from Egypt. It just is a continuation of the thread.
Okay. And why is that important though? Like, why do we have to mark Shabbat with Egypt? Yeah, Michael.
Well, we didn't have the freedom to rest when we were slaves in Egypt. We couldn't observe the Shabbat.
Oh, that's a really nice idea. That we're just marking this fact that we are in a non-enslaved place at this time, and so therefore, nice. I like that. Other thoughts, Carol.
And we were told to observe Shabbat. We were given the gift of Shabbat even before we got to Mount Sinai and we were given Torah. So it's harkening back to the very first thing that God gave us out of love.
Right. Stuart.
Well, I was getting to Sinai because we received the mitzvot at Sinai, and which is part of the Exodus. So I think that this makes reference. This could make reference to that as well.
Great. Let's see. I see Deborah, Nancy, and then
Also, I think it links back to where in the beginning it mentions our heritage. And so again, it's this part of linking back to us as a nation, as leaving Egypt is when we became a people. And so it's highlighting that this is not only a religious ritual, but it's part of our sense of peoplehood. We're both a religion and a people, and we're separate and we're special.
great. So let me ask this question. Now that we've read through this whole thing, why do we use this blessing and a blessing over wine? How does that accomplish the mitzvah of remembering to make Shabbat holy?
Well, the rituals of the wine and the prayer are a way to declare the separation from the norm. And so the ritual helps us understand that it's different.
And how then, think you, is it different or enhanced either from the candles, which is also a demarcation of time, and services? Is it different in some ways? Does it enhance the remembering of Shabbat in some ways? Yeah.
Well, it makes us stop and think. It makes us stop and remember when we were slaves. It makes what we are doing a conscious act. When we turn on a light switch, I don't think we think about the fact of the source of the electricity or the actual turning on of the light switch. But when we light the candles, we do think of the source of the light and about what we're doing. So I think it's all a call to consciousness.
Call to consciousness, I like that. Ronnie.
I think that there's something about the sweetness of wine. I think that it is that when you go to the body, when you go to the senses, light candles, which is about light. But I think there's something about the sweetness of the wine that is very special. I also think that wine is a treat, and it is it's something that costs more than water. It says, I am invested in experiencing this. So both the sweetness and the expense makes it something that heightens the importance of the day.
Nice. I like that a lot. I think the other thing that I think about is if candles are a way making us aware of kind of the goodness around us or our current state, then when you move to Kiddush, you're saying, okay, I've arrived at that state, and these are the reasons that I'm here, perhaps. And I really have to make sure that this day is sacred and holy, and I have to remember how I got here. So I have an awareness, I'm here, and then I have to remember how I got here. And once I've remembered how I got here, then you can have the challah, which to me is then the fulfillment of it in some sense. And so you walk through these rituals, and they build on one another. Marty.
I actually think there's one more layer to see the whole part of, so you're saying in Shabbat, one person says the candles and one person says the beginning of the Kiddush, but when you get to Kivanu, everyone sings together. So that sort of like brings everybody else in, maybe who's just sort of standing inside and not participating or just watching and saying, oh, you're doing this, what am I supposed to do? And that part of the sort of brings everybody together, I think, in an interesting way. It's just that one line. I was reading that line very literally for the first time in my life when we were reading in English. I was thinking, wow, that's a really deep line. It talks about we and everything. So I see that's the reason why, but I never, that's sort of like one little moment in that prayer that sort of everybody's there and everybody's participating, everybody's singing that part. And I didn't realize how special that was within the context of the whole beginning of the Shabbat. And so it's sort of,
yeah,
I think that sort of like brings people in.
Yeah, and we seek to be holy to you, to embrace the sacred potential. For you gave us and passed down this holiness of Shabbat. So now I don't know, Marty. Marty's talking about in the traditional chant of the Kiddush. There's a refrain that is often participated in by those around the leader of the. It's actually what we use it. We use a TVE, but in any case, I'm not sure where that minhag, that custom started. But interesting. Okay, so we know that the candles make us aware. We know that the Kiddush reminds us how we got here. The question is, okay, so we know we have the sacred wine. We know that it's a holy thing. We know that the wine sets apart space and time. We know that the wine is something that's holy and tastes good. But the question is there something unique about this ritual other than just standing or sitting and holding a glass of wine? And so then we can look to the mystics. And this is this is a really interesting text that I'm really excited to share with you all. Okay, so would anybody like to try to read this? It can be a little complicated, but is there a volunteer? If not, I will. All right, I'll read it. Linda, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm going to get the names all wrong.
Rabbi Hizkiah.
Rabbi Hizkiah opened. It is written, as a rose among thorns, that a rose is the assembly of Israel, because there is a rose and there is a rose. Just as a rose among thorns is tinged with red and white, the assembly of Israel consists of judgment and mercy. Just as a rose has 13 petals, the assembly of Israel is surrounded on all sides by the 13 attributes of mercy. However, Elohim, that is here, thought to bring out the 13 words that surround the assembly of Israel and guard it.
Okay, so there's 3 parts to this teaching. I'm going to try to unpack the first part, although the first part is less critical to what we're going towards, but it's really interesting. So there's this teaching in the Song of Songs that says there's a rose among thorns, which means what? What does the metaphor mean? Anyone?
Beauty among the hardships of life.
Great. So that is definitely one plausible read. So then it says that Israel is the rose. And then the Hebrew basically says there's a rose and there's like there's any rose and then there's like the rose. And that a rose has a little bit of red and a little bit of white. And the Assembly of Israel has din, which is judgment, and rachamim, which is mercy. So the mystics are talking about the 10 sfirot, or the different levels of divinity in our world, and they're opposites of each other. Din, judgment, and rachamim, mercy, sit opposite each other. Just as the rose has 13 petals, what they're talking about here is the 13 attributes of God. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech HaPaim. We sing this on the high holy days and on festivals, these 13 attributes of mercy that come from the Torah. So they're saying that Israel is surrounded on all sides by these 13 attributes of mercy. So there's something here about a circular, so Israel's in the middle and we're being encircled by mercy. God's mercy that's all around us and that guards us. Okay, that is where we are. Keep the circular metaphor with us. Okay, Linda, do you want to go on?
Afterwards, this is mentioned another time. The reason it is mentioned another time is to bring out the 5 rigid leaves that surround the rose. And these 5 stand for salvation. These are also the 5 gates. It is written of this secret, I will raise the cup of salvation. It is the cup of blessing. The cup of blessing must rest on 5 fingers and no more, just as a rose rests on 5 rigid leaves that correspond to the 5 fingers. And this rose is the cup of blessing. From the second to the third mention of the name Elohim, there are 5 words. From here on, the light was created and concealed, enclosed within that covenant, and entered the rose and fructified it. And this is referred to as a fructiferous tree, wherein is the seed thereof. And this seed truly exists in the letter of the covenant. And just as the form of the covenant is sown in 42 conceptions from that seed, so is the legislative special name of creation sown.
So we probably could have left off the last 2 sentences, but thank you for reading that word. I'm grateful. So this is really interesting here. What is this saying about the rose and the rigid leaves around it? It's a little complicated text. A cup of blessing. Yeah.
What's the
Go
source
ahead.
of this text?
It's the Zohar. It's the mystical text, the famous mystical text. Yeah, this is actually from the first chapter in the Zohar. So it says here that there's a cup of blessing and it must rest on 5 fingers and no more, just as a rose rests on 5 rigid leaves that correspond to the 5 fingers. So therefore, the 5 fingers and the 5 rigid leaves, these 5 stand for salvation or Yeshua, right? Which is this idea that there's blessing in this world and we have to lift it up. So have you ever seen anyone hold a Kiddush cup like this?
Yes.
Yes, I'm gonna come out of this for a second. You ever seen anybody hold a Kiddush cup like this? Not like this.
I always do.
But like this. Okay. The reason that people hold the Kiddush cup like this is because of this text.
Mm.
Yes, I see some hands, and then I want to go back to the text and figure out what that means for us. Carol.
So when a baby is born, the first thing we do is we check and say the baby has 5 fingers on each hand and 5 toes on each foot. The baby is healthy. The baby is well. That creation was perfect. And I wonder if that links back to the 5 fingers of holding something up, the 5 fingers of stability that we see in this text.
Yeah, and what are they holding up in this case? They're holding up Israel. And then you're saying, okay, well, Israel, then you're manifesting Israel in the context of Kiddush wine, which is the blessing, right? That's great. I love that. I love that. Susan.
I too was thinking Israel, but I was thinking that the 5 fingers were God's hand holding Israel.
Well, it does say that here a little bit too. You could infer that from the second to the third mention of the God's name, there are 5 words. And this is talking about, I believe this is talking about Genesis. And so if you look back at the text, there's 5 words in between the Elohim or the Adonai. And so you're saying that those are the 5 elements of creation around it. Other thoughts? Stuart.
I was wondering whether the fact that 5 fingers are mentioned suggests that the cup should be lifted with a single hand and not 2 hands, and whether there might be any significance to that.
That's a really good question. I think it is implying 1.
Isn't that, don't you see sometimes in the Christian churches like a 2-handed
hold? I don't know. Maybe it's a bigger cup.
You know what I mean? Like it's something different.
It's the chalice for the for the Eucharist.
Right. But here in this context, but what are we channeling? Right? There's 5 books of Torah, yes. But what are we channeling when we are holding the Kiddush cup? Right? We're transforming this moment into something a little bit more significant, into our role. We're not just, right, acknowledging that this is a sacred day. What are we doing if we hold it this way, taking this text as something that can inform our practice? Marty?
Let Deborah go out. Deborah would raise your hand before me, then I'll go up.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Well, you know how sometimes people wear a charm as the hand of God. Do you know that Shaddai was upside down hand? Maybe it's signifying the hand of God in the sense that channeling through your hand.
Yeah. No, I think we're taking on a significant role if we understand the text in this way when we lift up the Kiddush cup. Yes, Deborah.
Yeah, and I think it's like part of that partnership, like even from the Hamotzi or the blessing over the wine, we have to be partners with God in creating the sacred space and creating a better world. And I was always taught that holding it that way was, again, part of Shabbat, that on Shabbat, we don't grasp things. We're not creating on Shabbat. We are thanking God. We are part of that relationship with God. So we hold it in the palm of our hand like that rather than grasping it.
Nice. That's nice too. Thank you. Michael.
I think the text said that we're holding a cup of blessing. And so if we're holding it in an open hand, that would signify to give blessing as opposed to holding on to it, but let it out and be free with it.
So yes, and as Danny just put in the chat, it's like cradling it, so sort of nestling it in a gentle way. Yes, Michael, I like that a lot. All right, so let's extend this metaphor a little bit further. We'll try to unpack the last part of this, I'm going to try to unpack a little bit of this. So here we go. In the beginning, Rabbi Shimon opened, the flower buds appeared on the earth. The flower buds refer to the act of creation, right? So if we are holding our hand and we're holding the rose, what are we doing?
Holding creation in our hand.
We're holding creation in our hands. Exactly. Right? So that we are actually linking, the 6th day of creation, we're holding it. And we have to do something with it. And then it's in what is then that creation. It is us in the world. And so therefore the Israel is the blessing. So we're truly holding the capacity for creation and blessing in our world in our hands when we recite Kiddush. This is one interpretation. They appeared on the earth, these flowers appeared on the earth on the third day, as it is said, and they shall sprout, and the earth shall sprout. That was when they appeared on earth. The time of the singing has come, and this is the fourth day, when there was a reduction from the light spelled deficiently without vavs, symbolizing something missing, the potential for evil. Let's see here if any of this adds to us what we're talking about. Basically, this is just saying another set of what these 6 days of creation represent. But what I love here is this idea that the flower refers to the act of creation. And we are holding our hand and holding the flower, the rose, in the middle of it. Okay, so what do we do with this? Danny.
I like actually the linking of the two bits. So there was the first part, which was that we were holding Israel, and the second part that we were holding creation, which links the idea of the Vayera Vayivoker Yom HaShishi creation and the like coming out of Egypt, the liberation from Egypt, all in the same thing. It makes a more explicit link between the two.
Maybe we should transition from one hold to another hold on the blessing, like we flip over the etrog on Sukkot. Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah, Nancy.
Oh, I hope you don't think this is really flipped, but what's coming to my mind is that old song, he's got the whole world in his hand.
Yeah, right?
I'll save you my singing more.
No, I feel like Nancy, I feel like you sang, did you sing it another time? I don't know. Okay, so what's interesting to me is that you could just do Kiddush and let it be, or you could hold the Kiddush cup and you could look at the wine inside. You can remember the people who sang Kiddush at our table, and you can think about blessing. And you can think about, this is a sacred day, and what have I done, and what is my role in bringing forth blessing into the world? Right? That's the way we're holding it. You're holding blessing, you're holding the possibility of this rose to bloom, and when it blooms in a beautiful way, right, you can be the person holding that. To me, that creates a ritual that we speed over really quickly at the end of services, and can transform it into something that can truly change the way we think about Shabbat and the importance of setting aside time to think about the blessings and the role in which we're being a part of that in our world. So what do you think about that? You gonna hold your Kiddush cup differently this week? So here's what I think. There, just like that, Nancy's got it. Try also while you're doing that, or maybe on Friday night services, even amidst the end of service, hold the Kiddush cup, but look at the wine or grape juice and just allow yourself to meditate on the possibility for you to bring blessing into the world and for the ways in which we've received blessing. Who have we held up and who has held us up? I think that this ritual, it's extraordinary to me when we study it. It's like, why are we allowing this amazing thing to go on in a way that we don't pause to talk about it? Because such a thing that we're so ingrained into so many of us to do in such a rote way has the power truly to transform a small part of our week. And I think when we set those times to be aware of it, it can be powerful. So my hope this week is that you look at the light that you bring in and you see the goodness, and then you hold the Kiddush cup and you reflect on the goodness that you experienced and the goodness that you can bring out, and see the possibility of the rose in your life, even I guess literally right now among the thorns. And so, as I said last time, we can wish each other Shabbat Shalom on a Wednesday night, but we can, but that's all I got. That's all I got tonight. And so, for those who, yeah, thank you for being here and for sharing. Anybody want to add anything else before we say goodnight?
That was really beautiful, Philip.
I learned so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I hope that you can tell your friends, and truly, because we so often go through rituals because we learned them a long time ago. And I think it begs every single thing that we do in life, but also in our tradition, I think begs an exploration of why we do it. Because why not? Because we're different people now. And so I think we can always explore it in different ways. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. I wish you a good rest of the week. I hope you continue to stay safe and healthy. And we will conclude this 3-part with Challah on December. I'll tell you right now, December. Okay. I think it's December 9th. Yes.
December 9th, yeah.
December 9th. All right.
Thank you for the unique insights.
We will study Challah on December 9th. I will send out texts prior, and perhaps even a little, if anybody has anything for Challah that they wanna offer, let me know, and I'd love to include it. All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
Laila Tov. Laila Tov. Good night.
Laila Tov. Thank you, Phyllis.
Thank you.